Hello everyone, welcome to In the Trenches, Kroll's weekly threat intelligence briefing. Today is the 16th of June. My name is George Glass, and joining me today from the threat intelligence team is Ryan Hicks. As always, we'll be covering the most recent trends our threat intelligence team is witnessing in the trenches. So let's get into the situation report. One article this week, this is relating to a brute force attack against Apache Tomcat Manager detected by GreyNoise. They recently observed a coordinated spike in malicious activity against Apache Tomcat Manager interfaces. On the 5th of June, GreyNoise registered well above baseline volumes, indicating a deliberate attempt to identify and access exposed Tomcat services at scale. According to GreyNoise, roughly 400 unique IPs were involved in the activity observed across both tags during this period of elevated activity. Most of the activity originated from these IP addresses exhibited a narrow focus on Tomcat services. Further, GreyNoise, while not tied to a specific vulnerability, they state that the behavior highlights ongoing interest in exposed Tomcat services. Broad opportunistic activity like this often serves as an early warning of future exploitation. And indeed, we did see similar things to that in March with both Ivanti products and Fortinet products as well. So certainly one to pay attention to there over the coming weeks. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, please get in touch with us using cti@kroll.com. So for the rest of today's briefing, I'm going to be covering Patch Tuesday, and I'll be giving some more information on the malware we saw being dropped by an assumed compromise of PDFast, which we are now calling FULLMETAL. Ryan will be covering two more vulnerabilities in Chrome and Cisco identity services. So let's talk about Patch Tuesday. 70 vulnerabilities fixed. One of those is a 0-day. 20 critical vulnerabilities addressed this month. 14 of those are privilege escalation vulnerabilities, and 26 of those are remote code execution vulnerabilities. Now, we do have some very interesting cases here. The first one, CVE 2025-33053, with a CVSS score of 8.8, and this is another WebDAV remote code execution vulnerability. And there's certainly been no shortage of threat actors abusing WebDAV over the last year or so. This is a remote code execution vulnerability in Windows WebDAV, and it's been reported by Checkpoint researchers and has been actively exploited in targeted attacks in the Middle East by the threat group Stealth Falcon, also known as Fruity Armor, which Kroll tracks as KTA 474. Apparently, exploitation in this campaign involves phishing, delivering shortcut files which abuse Windows utilities to load malicious binaries from attacker-controlled WebDAV shares through executable path hijacking. Payload delivery typically involves Horus Loader, dropping the Horus agent malware for C2 communications, credential dumping, key logging, and further persistence. Immediate patching, disabling WebDAV, and monitoring the abuse of Windows systems binaries are essential defensive measures in this case. On the critical fixes, Kroll assesses that the following vulnerabilities are going to be the most significant. The first of these is CVE 2025-33073. Again, this has a CVSS score of 8.8, and this is a Windows SMB client elevation of privilege vulnerability. It's stated as a privilege escalation, but I think it can be trivially used for remote code execution as well. For this, an authenticated attacker, that's an important note there, an authenticated attacker can abuse a logical flaw in Windows NTLM Kerberos handling to reflect credentials back at the originating host, executing commands as system. This enables an attacker to manipulate marshaled targets into RPC calls, tricking the local host into authenticating itself over SMB when SMB signing isn't enforced. So essentially, this just means that LSAS is failing to properly validate the target information structure, allowing credential reflection, which allows for privilege escalation. Synactive has produced a technical write-up along with the discoverers of the flaw, and that is Red Team Pen Testing. Links to those reports are available in our weekly report. A POC exploit was made available on GitHub, making short-term exploitation of this vulnerability more likely. That was put on into the open source on the 14th of June. So Kroll is strongly recommending enabling SMB signing and applying the June security update as soon as possible. We are deploying detection rules to identify behavior associated with exploitation of this activity. And it's also worth noting that the POC code uses tools such as PettyPotam and Impacket, for which Kroll already has high fidelity detections in place. Finally, for Patch Tuesday, there's a spate of vulnerabilities here that affect both Word and Office. While the current threats tend to not focus on Office documents so much anymore, Kroll assesses that the nature and the severity of the following vulnerabilities could lead to them being weaponized in the future. And note that for some of these vulnerabilities, updates for Microsoft 365 for Office have not yet been deployed, and the preview pane is an attack vector. So those are all of the vulnerabilities you can see there on the left, starting with 32717. Certainly one to address. No technical information has been released for those vulnerabilities as of yet. Next, I'm going to talk about a malware that we are now calling FULLMETAL, and this follows a blog post that we released a few weeks ago. In April, we've been tracking a large wave of malicious activity surrounding a suspected supply chain attack on the PD-Fast software. If you recall, in this campaign, a malicious update is executed via the updater scheduled task, and that scheduled task would then download the pdf.bin file and execute it, and that's what led to detections for malicious activity across a number of our monitored estate. Since first discovering the malware, the Kroll malware analysis group has been reverse engineering the malicious artifact. In the process of doing so, the analyst found that this stage of the malware is written in Python and uses PyArmor protector to obfuscate its own intentions. And because of this fact, and the fact that many of the extracted strings from the malware's files give hints about the malware's intention, the Kroll Threat Intelligence team has named this malware variant FULLMETAL Stealer. Just a note here that we are highly confident in the detections currently deployed to identify FULLMETAL execution. There's a more technical breakdown in the weekly report, and we'll be following this up with some more blog posts in due course. But just a quick rundown of some of the capabilities of FULLMETAL. It has virtual machine detection, browser interaction to aid with some of its stealing capabilities. It also includes cloud interaction, file writing, the ability to query the current privilege level that it's being executed under. It has persistence mechanisms, including scheduled task manipulation, and as well as a suite of other stealer capabilities. A couple of interesting things I've pulled out from the article here. The first of them is that it uses AES GCM encryption. We've already mentioned the fact that it's PyArmor packed, but it also has macOS specific strings, specifically OSA script, which references AppleScript, the scripting language for macOS. The purpose of that feature is unknown. PD-Fast does not have a macOS version, and even if it has, Kroll has observed this campaign targets solely Windows devices so far. As I mentioned, a technical blog post will be available very soon. But another thing I really wanted to draw attention to is the contributions of the Kroll Mag team to the PyArmor tooling repository with some of our findings from this case. So hopefully in the future that will help with deobfuscating some of those payloads there. And with that, I will now hand over to Ryan to talk about a vulnerability in Chrome. Over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, George. Hi, everyone. So yeah, just a few vulnerabilities going over. Firstly, is CVE 2025 5419 in Google Chrome. So the it has a CVSS of 8.8, which is high. The vulnerability allows a remote attacker to exploit a heap corruption via a crafted HTML page. It doesn't require privileges and is allegedly low in complexity. However, it does require user interaction to browse to a compromised web page to exploit. The Google advisory indicated that attackers are actively exploiting this flaw to attack users when visiting compromised sites. However, they haven't yet provided any details really into these attacks, nor who carried them out. And the vulnerability has since also been added to the CISA known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. And also just noting that the vulnerability was also addressed by Microsoft for the Edge browser, which was part of Patch Tuesday that George ran through just now. So recommendations really updating to the Chrome version shown right in the middle of the screen there, and also enforcing auto updates for Chrome is a high recommendation really, if not already in place, just so future updates are automatically applied to the Chrome browser like this, particularly when they're exploited in the wild so quickly after being released. And then lastly, on the recommendations, EDR should also help with this with memory corruption detection, which should alert on suspicious browser child processes. Go to the next slide, please. So secondly is CVE 2025-20286, has a CVSS of 9.9, which is critical. And this is a vulnerability in cloud deployments of Cisco Identity Services Engine. And the affected deployments are Amazon Web Services, Azure, and Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. And the vulnerability could allow for an unauthenticated remote attacker to access sensitive data, execute limited administrative operations, modify system config, or disrupt services. So quite a wide potential attack scope there if exploited. Cisco did note that the vulnerability exists because credentials are improperly generated when being deployed on cloud platforms, resulting in different ISC deployments sharing the same credentials. So our weekly report contains a full list of the version numbers affected and associated hotfixes, as well as which are also in the original advisory. They did note, Cisco, that they are aware of proof of concept exploit codes being available, although there's no reporting of exploitation in the wild as of yet, but high likelihood that now that POC code is out, that it will be exploited relatively soon. There are no workarounds to address the vulnerability. However, Cisco did provide several mitigations that they recommend for affected products. So we certainly recommend to look at those and consider those mitigations if relevant, as well as patching using the hotfixes that Cisco have provided, which is essential really to fully mitigate affected products before exploitation does occur. That's all for me. Back to you, George.
Thank you very much, Ryan. That's all we have time for this week. Remember, if you have any questions, please remember to contact us at cti@kroll.com. See you next week and have a great day.